Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is June the 10th, 2024. It has been 3,787 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 111 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 108 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened over the weekend and Monday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. There are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. We maintain Russia's ongoing spring-summer offensive has failed to achieve any of its operational goals after 51 days, and we further assess that Russian combat potential is declining. 2. The sharp increase in aggressive acts by the Russian Federation directed at the NATO alliance and its member nations is a direct result of the failed policy of de-escalation and excessive fear of Moscow's tactical nuclear threats. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox. 3. Russia is setting conditions to commit further acts of aggression in Europe. 4. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed 95% of its thermal power plant capacity, are a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 2 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court on March the 5th. 5. The quantity of artillery ammunition available to Ukrainian frontline units continues to increase and should reach a level sufficient to stabilize their defensive lines throughout the theater by the end of June. 6. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March the 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is encouraging escalation. 7. Autocrat Putin has started the largest purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense, led by the FSB, since Joseph Stalin's 1936 to 1938 purge. 8. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. On June the 8th, Russia launched 13 Shahed-136 one-way drones from the Kursk region of Russia and occupied Crimea, and a single Kh-59 guided air-to-surface missile. The missile and 9 of the Shaheds were intercepted. On Saturday, Russian shelling of Kupiansk wounded a civilian and damaged 4 homes. A drone-delivered IED hit a civilian car in Kozacha Lopань, wounding 2 women who are now in hospital. On Sunday, Russian shelling of Borova wounded a man, and a woman was injured due to Russian shelling in Dvorichansk. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, bombed the village of Khotimля, destroying a school and damaging the village council building, a store and 2 homes. 1 civilian was killed and 2 wounded. On Saturday, in the Donetsk Oblast, Russian shelling of New York killed 1 and wounded 2. In the Kherson Oblast, Russia attacked 14 villages and settlements and the cities of Bereslav and Kherson. 1 person was killed and 5 injured. 2 of the wounded were medical personnel in an ambulance that was attacked in Belozerka. On Sunday, Russian attacks on the Kherson Oblast wounded 2. On Friday, Russia attacked the Nikopol rayon in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast using more than a dozen one-way drones, killing a woman and a 70-year-old man. On Saturday, Russia conducted a double-tap attack on the village of Pokrov, wounding an emergency services worker responding to an earlier drone strike. The 28-year-old is hospitalized in serious condition. On Sunday, one of the civilians wounded by a Russian missile strike in the Poltava district on June 7th died from her injuries. Here is today's action report. Russia's spring-summer offensive is in its 51st day, with 101 assaults carried out on Friday, 96 on Saturday, and 73 through Sunday evening. Through June 8th, the 7-day moving average for attacks dropped to 103, down from the May 17th peak of 136. The number of attacks by Russian forces continues to be below the linear trend line, which is flattening. The Russian officers killed in Ukraine project confirmed the death of 4,210 military officers since February 24, 2022. The number does not include members of Chechen forces, the 1st Army Corps of the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, the 2nd Army Corps of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, or senior leaders in private military companies. The database uses information from the Russian state media, the Russian Ministry of Defense, funeral and memorial announcements, names added to war dead monuments, and obituaries. The actual number is higher. On Friday, during a press conference with French President Emmanuel Macron, United States President Joe Biden warned that, quote, "Putin is not going to stop at Ukraine. All of Europe will be threatened," adding, "We are not going to let that happen." If President Biden believes these words, in our assessment, the restrictions on the use of US weapons on any military target in Russia must be lifted. Washington should provide Ukraine with everything it needs to restore its 1991 borders as quickly as possible. That includes providing significantly more aid and increasing domestic defense spending. An air defense-only no-flying zone should be established in western Ukraine, 30 to 50 kilometers deep, intercepting any Russian missile or drone that enters the region on a trajectory toward a NATO nation. Words like "never again" and "as long as it takes" will not bring Ukraine to victory. What will lead to victory is the unrestricted use of weapons on Russian targets, with the only requirement being to adhere to international humanitarian law. That and a lot more weapons. Ukraine's allies can defend the European continent in Kyiv today or Berlin in 3 to 5 years, having a whole nation extinct on their conscience. Now let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Obelcz, we begin in the Liptsi-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. Ukrainian forces continued offensive operations in Vovchansk and engaged in positional fighting north of Liptsi. Russian forces continued to be pushed out of Vovchansk, with Ukrainian forces controlling up to 80% of the settlement. The central district of the city has become a no-man's land, and we adjusted the line of conflict. Our assessment on Friday that fresh Chechen forces would be used as blocking troops was accurate, with Russian units complaining about the new Akhmat forces. Fighting west of Gleboke also continued, where Ukrainian forces continued to make gains. A geolocated video showed a BTR-4E infantry fighting vehicle striking Russian positions near and within the settlement. In the Belgorod region of Russia, the Ukrainian Air Force bombed a Russian ammunition depot in the northern part of Rakitnaya. Videos recorded by area residents captured the sound of small arms ammunition exploding. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces continued their attacks south of Yevshan in the direction of Petropavlivka without success. Video from the Ukrainian 43rd Mechanized Brigade showed a drone-delivered IED destroyed a Russian UR-77 Meteor demining vehicle in the northwestern part of Ivanivka. Based on the location of Russian troops, we have coded the village as under Russian control and moved the line of conflict. Attempts by Russian forces to advance on the settlement of Peshchane and capture the village of Berestove were unsuccessful. Russian collaborator Gennady Matsegora, the former mayor of Kupiansk, is in critical condition after an assassination attempt in Stary Oskol, Belgorod, Russia. Local officials reported he had been shot near his home. Matsegora fled to Russia during Ukraine's Kharkiv counteroffensive in September 2022. In the Svatove of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces probed Ukrainian defenses west of occupied Novovodane in the direction of Grekivka, suffered losses and retreated to their defensive positions. In the Crimea, Russian forces continued their attempts to advance in the direction of Nevske and Terny and in the Serebryanka forest without success. On Friday, Ukraine hit a Russian military base in the occupied city of Luhansk, severely damaging one of the main buildings. Russian sources have shared many pictures and videos of the building and the surrounding grounds used as a military training base for the Second Army Corps of the so-called Luhansk People's Republic. Occupation officials claimed that civilian targets were hit and released pictures of missile debris as proof. The debris was identified as coming from Russian S-300 5V-55 air defense missiles and not ATACMS, with several parts easily identifiable. The 5V-55 is the original S-300 with a range of only 25 kilometers, and its use by Russian air defense is unusual due to its age. Let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siverskoye, Russian forces eased their assaults, concentrating on attacking in the direction of Vyimka. A 500-meter advance was recorded along the railroad grade, and the map was adjusted. In the Kostiantynivka, heavy fighting continued on the eastern edges of Kalinivka, where Ukrainian troops made additional marginal gains northeast of the village. Geolocated video confirmed that Russian forces had advanced 300 meters into the canal district of Chasiv Yar. There were 2 flag raisings in a heavily damaged building, confirming the advance. Ukrainian forces still control 65% of the canal district, and reports by Russian sources of an advance into the Novy microdistrict are false. Fighting continued on the western edges of Ivanivske, with no change in the situation. Further south, fighting continued east of Klishchiivka and east and southeast of Andriivka. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, the heaviest fighting continues to be in the Avdiivka AO, with Russian forces carrying out 27 attacks on Sunday. Assaults continue from occupied Ocheretine and Arkhangelske in the directions of Kalinove, Novoalexandrivka, Progress, Yevgenivka and Sokil. On the eastern edge of Sokil, a Russian BTR-82 armored personnel carrier engaged a Ukrainian Bradley fighting vehicle. The Russian APC's anti-drone protection limited the direction of its 30mm autocannon, landing only a couple of hits on the advancing Bradley that fired into the BTR-82 at point-blank range. Multiple Russian dismounts were killed or fell off, with the Russian APC coming to rest on a tree. We recorded this as an advance on the map, moving the line of conflict, but it is unclear if Russian forces consolidated their gains. Northeast of Sokil, a Russian video showed that an 8th M1A1 Abrams main battle tank was destroyed. Russian forces also continued their attempts to advance on Novopokrovske and Novoselivka Persha without success. Russian mercenary Melblogo Wogonzo claimed that fighting continued east of the Karlovsky Reservoir and Vovcha River in the direction of Karlivka. The situation in the Vuhledar AO has become partially clarified. In Krasnohorivka, a geolocated video confirmed that Russian forces had advanced west of the brick factory but were under intense fire. A second video showed a Russian armored column of a tank, 2 infantry fighting vehicles, a turretless total tank, and an MTLB armored personnel carrier attempting to advance into the southern part of the settlement. The Ukrainian 59th Mechanized Brigade destroyed all 5 vehicles with artillery, drone strikes, and anti-tank weapons. It is still unclear what the situation is in the eastern part of the settlement. Russian mill bloggers walked back their false claims that Georgiivka was captured. Ukrainian forces continued to defend Paraskoviivka with no change in the situation. In the Staromlynivka AO, Russian forces continued their attacks in the southern parts of Staromayorsk, where they made tactical gains. Ukrainian forces have been pushed back to the northern part of the settlement, and the situation is difficult. In the occupied city of Donetsk, Major Sergei Leshchenko, commander of the 1st Battalion, 114th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade, 1st Army Corps of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, was shot to death at the entrance of his home. There have been no arrests made. On Saturday, in the Sea of Azov, the engineering tugboat Engineer Smirnov was attacked by Ukrainian one-way drones, striking the ship and a barge it was towing. 2 sailors were wounded in the attack, which caused light to moderate damage to the superstructure of the tugboat. The vessel was sailing from Taganrog Bay at the eastern tip of the Sea of Azov, delivering the barge to the Kerch Strait as part of the ongoing effort to build anti-uncrewed surface vessel defenses around the Crimean bridge. The tugboat and barge are reportedly sailing back to the port of Azov, Russia. A video of the Crimean bridge showed that Russia was using the structure to carry fuel trains to occupied Crimea. Russia has been forced to use the bridge after 2 roll-on roll-off train car ferries were damaged in an ATACMS missile strike last week. Recent satellite images show that Russia has not started repairs on the ferry terminal, and neither damaged ferry has been moved. At the time of recording, we were aware of 2 ATACMS missile attacks on occupied Crimea near Yevpatoria and Jankoy. There was no information on damage or casualties. Chechen aspiring dentist Colonel General Ramzan Dondon Kadyrov claimed that Chechen forces had started an offensive in the Sumy Oblast and took control of the border village of Ryzhivka. Kadyrov released a video made by the 1st TikTok Chechen Brigade showing their settlement being attacked by towed artillery, indirect tank fire and mortars. The video went on to show 3 of 4 Chechen soldiers wandering a part of the empty settlement. Multiple Ukrainian officials denied Ryzhivka was under Russian occupation, and the short clip taken in front of the village administration building did not show any Chechen soldiers at the site.
Hey there, this is David Obelcz. I am the Chief Content Officer for Malcontent News, part of the WBHG News family. We have a real-time update on this story. The skepticism of myself and the analyst team was very well placed. This was just a border incursion, and there is a lot of anger right now among Russian commanders on that border region. This is what one Russian mill blogger had to say about the situation, and I quote, Ramzan Kadyrov, by announcing the liberation of the village of Ryzhivka on the border with the Kursk region, endangered our military. There are losses. Sources in the general staff told us, quick sidebar, they mean the Russian general staff, about this. This is not the first time we have entered Ryzhivka. Our scouts are there all the time. But this idiot, they mean Kadyrov, decided to brag about something unknown. As a result, the enemy, they mean Ukraine, captured a group of military personnel near the border in the Kursk region. We have 21 dead, unquote. Ramzan Dondon Kadyrov and the 1st Akhmat TikTok Brigade have once again lived up to their reputation of being a danger to absolutely anyone and anything that is around them. Ironically, the Ukrainian military is one of the safest groups of people when Chechen Akhmat is around.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
On Saturday, Russia became the first nation in history to lose a Generation 5 fighter plane in combat. Ukrainian drones struck the Akhtubinsk military airfield in the Astrakhan Oblast of Russia. Satellite images and Russian reports confirmed that one of Russia's 6 to 8 serial production Su-57 Felon fighter planes was heavily damaged. We have a video on our social media channels, including TikTok, that provides more information. Also, on Saturday, Ukrainian drones successfully hit a warehouse at the Mozdok military airfield in the North Ossetia-Alania Republic. The amount and severity of damage is unknown. Here is my theater-wide update. Someone changed the sign because it's been 0 days since a Russian government official threatened nuclear war. On Saturday, autocrat Vladimir Putin repeated that the use of NATO alliance and allied weapons within the borders of Russia could spark a nuclear weapon response. Nope, still no mushroom clouds. Ukrainian military leaders have given the GBU-39 small-diameter bomb with a JDAM glide kit high praise, saying the guided munition is 90% accurate. According to a story in the Washington Post, the Ukrainian Air Force prefers the GBU-39 because 8 can be carried in a single sortie, and Russian air defenses can't intercept them in the glide phase. Ukraine announced that it had run out of unguided rockets for its Su-25 ground attack aircraft, so they've been modified to deliver French AASM Hammer-guided bombs. Ukraine has also exhausted its supply of US-provided Zuni unguided rockets. Approximately 6,000 of the Cold War munitions were provided, and they are no longer in production. Ukraine has modified the US-supplied M2A4 7-kilogram demolition charge into a drone-delivered IED for the Baba Yaga UAV. The charge is designed to blast through reinforced structures and roadbeds. The modification will enable Baba Yaga drones to deliver mini bunker busters. After pushback from several NATO alliance nations, including Turkey and Hungary, Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has abandoned a plan to US-proof NATO with a $100 billion 5-year military aid package for Ukraine. Some members express concerns about, quote, potentially misleading Ukraine. Reportedly, during the upcoming July NATO summit in Washington, D.C., members will agree to provide $43 billion in military and non-military aid to Ukraine. The Netherlands and Germany have signed an agreement and received approval from the US to build Patriot interceptors. The factory will be located in Germany. On Friday, France announced a new military aid package for Ukraine. There are too many items to list in today's podcast, but there is the full list in our almost daily situation report. Patreon subscribers get access to the sitrep and more. There is more information in the podcast description. The United States also announced a $225 million military aid package using the Presidential Drawdown Authority. The newest aid package includes air defense interceptors, artillery systems and munitions, armored vehicles, anti-tank weapons and other capabilities. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.